Sometimes I'm suspicious of the Sundays that I've been assigned to preach because sometimes the parables are a little tricky. I would say that today's parable that we have is the most difficult parable of them all. There are parables that we don't like, where it starts out and Jesus says, I've got this story that I want to tell you that is going to be a fine example of how you are not living your life the way I want you to. And we don't like those because we're living our own lives and we don't like Jesus telling us how to live our lives. But this one just does not make any sense at all. There is no literal through point. You know that you are in trouble when the PhDs that are writing the commentaries, their whole article is, these are the reasons why this parable is difficult to understand. And that you turn the page looking for, that's it. That's the whole commentary. When we look at the lesson that we have for today, one of the things that comes out, at least to me, is kind of picking around the edges a little bit. It is difficult with a parable because oftentimes we want to fill in what we see as gaps in the story. Well, maybe the manager was a good guy, or maybe the owner was a bad guy, and the manager was... You're not supposed to do that with parables. Parables, you're supposed to just be able to read start to back and you're done, and it makes sense, and it is what it is. And normally we try and squirm under them. But in this case, what we have is an owner and a manager. And notice that we get the manager's first name. His first name is Dishonest. And the dishonest manager has created quite a reputation for himself, such that it's gotten back to the owner, right? And the owner says, hey, look, buddy, I need to see the books. This isn't working because you're out of here. And so the guy panics. Maybe he lives on the ranch, the property, something, and he knows he's going to lose his housing, he's going to lose everything. So he's got to cut deals here, there, and everywhere so that he's got some goodwill in the community when he's cut loose, right? He's got to be savvy. Or what's the Greek word there? Shrewd, right? Now, in the parable, it seems that we are to be commended if we are being shrewd, which is not something as a parent, as I'm raising kids, thinking, I sure hope our kids grow up to be shrewd. It could be kind of a neutral term, but it's an odd phrase and not something that, well, kids, Jesus said we're to be shrewd. I think the thing that is helpful when we look at this text is that when we think of our economy, when we think of economics in this world, it's a hot mess. And if you were to look at things and try and describe it, you might end up with something like this mangled parable here. I'll give you just one example, because I love doing math, but I never got very far in math. So it's simple math when I do it. I heard in the last couple of weeks, given all of his efforts with Tesla over this last year, that there is a proposed compensation package for Elon Musk for the next decade. If he hits all of his marks, it's $1 trillion over 10 years. Trillion. Now, I'm sure he works really hard. Harder than clearly anyone in the history of the planet. But nonetheless, I did some math. If you were alive and working when Jesus was born, and you made $500,000 a day, until today, you would have less money than Elon Musk has today. $100,000 a day for 2,025 years. Like I said, he works really hard, I'm sure. But let's say this $100 billion a year for 10 years, which I know it doesn't quite work out, that he's got to hit target. Yeah, I understand that. But if we were to say $100 billion a year for 10 years, if he could somehow pry himself out of bed for just $50 billion, that other $50 billion would give every one of Tesla's 125,000 employees an additional $400,000 in compensation annually. They clearly don't need that incentive. I've solved that for you. I'll just leave that there. When we talk about what it means to be just and right in this world, when God calls for us to engage with the society around us, often we are kept quiet by forces that pile on us from the outside. Sometimes it can be difficult to speak up because it might put us on the outside of the group who makes decisions about things. There might be implications of punishment. We seem to be in a cycle where there is a fondness for punishing people. When we think about all of the aspects that go into this, we think of some of the darker chapters of history. Certainly, if we were to go to 1945 and 1946 in Nuremberg, you might hear, "I was just following orders," right? But I heard the more modern American equivalent, "I was just paying the mortgage," or "I was just providing health insurance for my family." How many of us are the recipients of decisions made in boardrooms about how we might live? Or in Palo Alto, how many of us are in those boardrooms where those decisions are made? So what do we have going on with the text for today? This business of how and who we serve, this business of wealth. When is it enough, right? When is it enough? How often are we in a scenario where we receive a compensation offer and we say, that's really too much. Could we discuss a different number? Is that something that is lifted up? Do we ask, that sounds great. Can you tell me what the rest of the employees are making so I can understand what this is in relationship to that? The gospel text that we have for today, I think, touches on the idea that in our society there is this sense of taking advantage of one another. This idea that our economy is win-lose, that I win when somebody else loses. That's not what Jesus would encourage us to be about. That's difficult. One of the things when we're looking at the text that we have for today is that a quick little side note reminder about the lectionary. I know you were just hoping there'd be a quick word about it, but we're reading the semi-continuous first reading instead of the complementary one like we might. Now, the complementary one is nice because it's, you guessed it, complementary to the gospel text. So when you have a challenging gospel text, you might think, does the complementary first reading have some light to shed on this? I'm glad you asked, because today you're getting a fifth reading, and this one is the complementary first reading from Amos. Hear this, you who trample on the needy and bring to ruin the poor of the land, saying, when will the new moon be over so that we may sell grain, and the Sabbath so that we may offer wheat for sale? We will make the ephah smaller and the shekel heavier, and practice deceit with false balances, buying the poor for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals, and selling the sweepings of the wheat. The Lord has sworn by the pride of Jacob, surely I will never forget any of their deeds. I think one of the challenges always in my whole life, as I think of going through school and in positions where I have served, in life in general, it's difficult to be the voice that is contrary. The voice that says, that doesn't sound right. We shouldn't do that. Right? And it feels like we're in a moment where Christ is calling for voices that say, that's not right. We shouldn't be doing that. Amen.